And one. We are, looks like, hold on, let me just make a second to make sure everything gets on. I think we're actually probably live. So, hey everybody, welcome again. We've had a busy week with multiple people, and today I'm joined by a special guest, James, who's
Hey,
actually, you're the founder of an altcoin you've got a token project, and you're a bit of a
yes.
jet setter right now, right? I guess. Where are you today?
I'm in London.
Oh, wow. So before we get started, and I'm not the best at introducing others, why don't you, give us a couple minutes, tell us a little bit about your background, where you come from, how'd you get into crypto, and yeah, why don't you just, yeah,
Sure.
go for it.
For the last 5 years, I'd been investing in Myanmar and looking at various projects, and I was there when it first opened up to Western investment, and I was there when projects started looking less and less interesting. I mean, it's really interesting when a country opens up after 5 decades of military rule, and then you can invest in the first luxury hotel in a country.
Mm.
And then after a couple of years, people are asking you to invest in the 40th luxury hotel in a country. And so it becomes less and less interesting. And so what I really wanted to build up in that country where I thought there was plenty of upside was developing education infrastructure there, just because the demand is so high. And we couldn't do it traditionally. It didn't make a lot of sense. So I started looking into leveraging technology into shortening the learning curve and shortening school time. And that went very well. And we started delivering education. And one of the issues I ran into was that it's very difficult for someone in America or Europe to trust me, who is a non-educator and without a very strong educational brand like Harvard, Stanford, Yale, something like that. And for me to say that one student in Myanmar or Bangladesh or India is as good as someone in Stanford or Yale or Princeton. And I thought, if you can make coursework open source, and then you made the skills assessment open source and randomized it to each individual, and then you could record grades in a way that is transparent and resistant to corruption, you could solve that problem. And blockchain really solved that problem for us.
Wow, that's kind of interesting. I guess before we get into the project, it's always nice to understand, where you come from. So are you, I guess, Myanmar, that's near Vietnam, right? That's like kind of Burma.
Yeah, yeah. It borders 5 countries: China, India, uh, Thailand, Laos, and Bangladesh.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind
And
of like a hub.
and are you from there? Were you born there? Are you?
Not at all. Born and raised in New York, and
Oh,
I just, as an investment opportunity, I spent 5 years in Africa doing a Fulbright, building up the recycling infrastructure in all of East Africa. I sold that factory, started a biotech hedge fund in New York, and people out in Southeast Asia knew I had a background in investing in difficult contexts, and they're like, countries opening up, come look at deals out here, and I did, and then I ended up realizing it was there's a capital flow eastward, so it's moving from the United States and Europe to China. And then instead of me looking at China, I thought the smart thing to do is look at where China is investing money into, and they're investing a lot of money into Myanmar.
wow. So this is kind of interesting. I've actually haven't had many conversations with people who have experience investing in developing countries. So
Hmm.
help me understand this, right? How do you start from, your New York person? Are you Manhattan kid or Brooklyn guy or,
Yeah, Manhattan. Grew up around 13th and 6th in the
Okay.
80s, bad neighborhood, and then my parents moved out to Queens where it was a lot safer, and they live in Queens today.
And did you go to, I guess you went to college probably somewhere in New York also, I assume then? Or?
No, I went to Stuyvesant, then took a couple of years off, built a business, and then ended up finishing my undergrad at Harvard University.
Oh, okay. So you're a
Mhm.
pretty intelligent guy. So how do you go from Harvard to, I guess you're in Eastern Africa. So what, were you like in Ethiopia or Sudan?
Uh, Graduated second in my class, won a Fulbright to do HIV research in Uganda.
Oh,
That first Fulbright's for 1 year, and then within 6 months, a lot of my patients were dying, and I thought it was something I was doing. So I got really scared and I started to look into it. And it turned out everyone with HIV was getting malaria, and malaria depresses the immune system, which hastens the progression from HIV to AIDS. And that's what was happening. And so I started looking into malaria, and I had no background in malaria. And
Now, are
I was
you a
definitely.
doctor, or did you have a medical education? Because I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not saying malaria isn't a problem to solve. It sounds like a serious problem, but
Uh-huh.
you know, I wouldn't just go, oh yeah, I got a malaria problem. Let me go. You know, like, do you have a medical background, or how did you?
Before highly active antiretrovirals became popular, a lot of people looked at different HIV treatments for people who were infected. And in the 90s, there was a lot of research done in behavioral stress management because everyone kind of understood that the more stressed out you were, the weaker your immune system would be, and then HIV would turn into AIDS very quickly. Now, my background at the time was in psychology, and some of the research I looked at used meditation and self-hypnosis, and I had a specialty in self-hypnosis and mental control research. That was the focus of my research when I was working at Harvard, and I wanted to tease those two apart and see if there was a difference and whether you could apply that in a context like Uganda, which is a landlocked country with a population of about 30 million at the time, and about 10% had HIV or AIDS. And because it was a landlocked country, you could not easily ship highly active antiretrovirals into the country. And if you know anything about AIDS research or people infected with HIV or AIDS, they have to take a cocktail of pills every day, meaning more than one pill. Meaning, if you have 10% of your population who needs those pills, you're talking about at least 3 million pills a day that need to be shipped into your country, which is impossible. So it was interesting to me to look at interventions that were non-pharmaceutical. And then that's where that research arose.
Wow. That's fascinating. Okay, so you're in Uganda and you're trying to solve this disease problem, specifically malaria based. How do you go from that into or malaria or HIV based? How does that become, you know, I'm investing in developing Eastern African country? I mean, that's
totally non-intentional. Malaria in Uganda is driven by mosquitoes, and I found out mosquitoes were breeding in still pools of water caused by blocked sewers. And these sewers were being blocked by plastic shopping bags people were just discarding in the street. And it made sense because there was no plastic recycling to build a plastic recycling plant to fix that particular problem. So I ran that for 4 years, built a big infrastructure all over East Africa, bringing plastic from all over the place and recycling it and selling that. And then I ended up taking an exit in 2010.
So you started a business then, I guess.
Yeah,
Somehow.
I started a business, absolutely.
And you were, yeah, and okay, so you started a business and you lived there. So you lived in Uganda for 5 years, or?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Running this business day and night. And then 2010, I took an exit because the government of Uganda wouldn't let me expand. They thought of it as bringing garbage into the country. It's just because we exceeded our country capacity for recycling, so we needed to start bringing raw materials from elsewhere. So I sold everything. I started a biotech hedge fund in New York. And then within a year, I got a call about Myanmar because they understood I was comfortable investing in contexts like that. And I had some money from selling the factory.
Wow. That's kind of cool. So now you are, I mean, Song is a Korean. Are you Korean then, or are you Chinese?
I'm half Korean. I'm half Taiwanese. My father's from Korea. My mother's from Taiwan. But they've lived in the United States for maybe 55 years now.
Okay, so going to Myanmar, you have no background. I mean, it was up until lately a dictatorship or some sort of you know,
dictatorship
spot.
for 5 decades. Yeah,
So
until
you
2012.
Okay, so it's 2012. They overthrow the dictator. There's freedom now, and they're like, "Hey, here's some money. Go, go build something." Or
well, it was my money, and then we raised some investment capital as well, and I structured a private equity fund because that's what I thought investments would look like in Myanmar. And then, yeah, we started looking at deals and investing.
Wow. So what did you build in Myanmar? I guess you had the junk factory, or not the junk. You had the recycling factory in Uganda.
Uh-huh.
You said you built a luxury hotel, or what did you do? Or?
Luxury apartment buildings, because we knew, me and my partner, we knew that NGOs would move in to help work on humanitarian issues, and they would bring executives there, and they need a certain standard of living, and it couldn't be third world. So that was very attractive. Looking at boutique hotels, looking at other deals like that. And then in 2016, we started, well, mostly me, I started a angel investment group talking to the diaspora around the world of Burmese people who either left the country to do business or who left as refugees. And the level of sophistication, investment sophistication, was relatively low. So I started to focus on my own projects, and it ended up being mostly focused on education and technology.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty fun. That's a pretty nice story. So now you're in education technology, and how do you run into this? I mean, you're basically like buying hard assets. How do you get into this whole like crypto blockchain world that is,
Well, I use blockchain. Originally, it focused on predictive analytics because, again, I have a background in psychology and neuroscience, and it was mostly psychological tests which have predictive ability for a student to kind of optimize what kind of course material that student could master very quickly. So, and that shortens classroom hours. So that's very important to me. And I thought I could augment that with artificial intelligence. So we started building machine learning recommendation engines which optimize content delivery to each specific individual. Now, the thing is, even if you deliver the best education to a particular person, if that person, say for instance in Bangladesh, there's a very low level of trust that that person has the skill set that that person claims to have. So we needed a way to kind of verify those skills in a way that anyone in the world, anywhere, could audit and verify and say, look, this person says he's a doctor, he has this much skill, and he's actually a doctor and actually has that much skill. And recording skills assessments on blockchain is a way of doing that. And we couldn't do it before blockchain.
Okay, so in terms of blockchain or whatever, so you looked at this, you were trying to solve a problem, and blockchain is the vehicle to solve it. So it's not like you weren't like a Bitcoin guy or
not at all.
You're just like, I got to solve this issue, and specifically the issue you have, because you're in this developing world, is some sort of quasi-immigration or labor issue where you need to verify credentials.
Yes. So very simple concept. If you take a course and you get an A, instead of me giving you an A, you are automatically issued an A or B or C or D or F token, and that represents your grade. And because it's a token transfer on chain, it's relatively tamper resistant. And then that's very important for different ethnic groups around the world, especially groups like the Rohingya, who are oppressed by various governments and militaries, who would run like a DDoS attack if you stored records in one place.
Oh, wow. So, okay, so yeah, I could see where, yeah, for refugees, if someone's trying to oppress them, huh. So then how do you handle standardization? Because, you went to Harvard, I'm a UFC guy, and, at the UFC, we always kind of thumbed our noses at the other people saying, oh yeah, those Princeton, like my brother went to Princeton, those Princeton people, they don't go to school. They just sit around and,
I don't believe the schooling matters that much. And then your experience of university, I'm guessing you could immediately point out areas where you could have just cut out and it wouldn't have made a difference in the end result of your university education.
Well,
So
I mean,
there's
that's a whole other discussion of
right, but there's optimization that's possible. That's what I'm saying. So so what's important in education, I believe, is not the teaching so much, but that you can kind of turn education into modules, so, and then remove so much of a need for a teacher to kind of repeat the same courses year after year. So instead of teaching arithmetic as an arithmetic course, you teach modules, multiplying fractions, dividing fractions, adding fractions, subtracting fractions. And as long as you master these skills and people accept your skill assessment, which is like an examination that this person has competency in, say, adding fractions, I think it's sufficient to put enough modules together where any particular jurisdiction can say, we need 12 modules to say this person has mastered arithmetic. Another jurisdiction might say we need 14 modules to say this person has mastered arithmetic. So as long as you complete these modules and deliver these modules to people, they can mix and match it to meet whatever jurisdictional requirements they have.
Okay. I mean, that just makes perfect sense. Yeah, that just makes sense.
Then it's not about what school you went to. It's just how much skill do you actually have mastered, and at what level.
Yeah, I don't know if it was your thing. I was reading something else on education because, personally I have opinions on education. And they were also going to look at education and then tie that to like earning potential or, job results or wage results and stuff like that to then also weigh, the value of the education, right? From place A or place B. But in your case, you're still dealing with just the basic function of like the worldwide immigration problem, right? Someone who got a medical degree in, I don't know, China comes to the US, or someone in Africa comes to the US and they have to go back to school again because the US boards don't recognize their ability to practice medicine. And or whether it's engineering or whether it's math or sciences or any sorts of skill, by putting it on the blockchain, you solve for an accreditation issue. That just makes sense. So I guess I'm curious, because I think what's most intriguing, I'm not saying the blockchain project isn't interesting. I mean, there's not much to talk about, I feel. But you seem to have this knack for getting into spots that might not seem apparent and then connecting things and really seemingly to find opportunity. Let's talk about that. That's actually kind of intriguing.
It's definitely what I'm good at, yes.
So how do you go about this? I mean, like you just kind of like bumble through life or, let's talk about this, I mean?
No, I think I'm very methodical. I don't do many things randomly. I believe the most upside in any situation is in areas that are overlooked. So I do not generally seek to further conversations, and that's what most people do. Like there's a general blockchain conversation going on right now regarding regulation. Oh, do we call this security token versus utility token? So I don't engage in that. I look at places in any space that are being overlooked, but that's where a lot of upside is. So for instance, right now we're looking at a lot of foundational technologies. We have an insurance product that we built in stealth that we'll release in a couple of weeks. We also built a voice-enabled trading app because my team and I were tinkering around with how do you get a refugee to access their crypto wallet without having to memorize a public-private key. So we started working with Amazon Alexa, and we have a voice-enabled trading app which works with Coinbase. We're integrating Binance now, and then we should release it in maybe 10 days from now. So we build things like that. We think there's a lot of upside there, and we don't think anyone's thinking about those things right now. But I think in general, that's how I think.
Interesting. So let's just talk. I mean, you've obviously noticed a lot, and I don't want you to give away any secrets.
Sure.
But you've been looking at this space, and the fundamental tenet of investing is you want to get to the right spot. If I know Malibu is going to become Malibu, and I buy all the beachfront property before it's Malibu, touchdown, I win, right?
Right.
So there's this large space, and it's interesting that you said regulatory, because we were looking at this back in the fall, and we made a pitch that everything's coming through, and come tax season, The two big things are going to be privacy coins, because people are going to realize, oh my gosh, all this stuff is traced and I got to pay taxes and this sucks. And then decentralized exchanges, because people were going to, right? So that was the regulatory wave. And, 6 months ago, no one talked about or knew about this. Now everyone's on it. That's the hot thing. So why don't we talk about, from your perspective, and I'd love to just brainstorm with you, because you're now a blockchain guy. Where is, where's the blue, I guess, where's the blue ocean, right? What do you see interesting as an underserved need? So you mentioned voice-enabled applications is one.
Yeah, sure. What exists on the Amazon Alexa store now is, hey, Alexa, what's the price of Bitcoin? Alexa tells you the price of Bitcoin. That exists. So we didn't think we could really innovate there. But what we really wanted is to remove the computer or the phone from the equation altogether, where you're just sitting here and doing whatever you're doing. And then you say, hey, Alexa, what's the price of Bitcoin? The Alexa device tells you what the price of Bitcoin. Okay, buy me 10 Bitcoin. And then it will give you a confirmation at what price and execute that trade for you. So, and that was very interesting to us, just because it removes all the complexity around the very beginning for most people, which is, like public-private keys. This is very complicated, understanding why you need both of these things. I think that's where a lot of people get hung up when they're trying to get into cryptocurrency. So that was interesting thing to solve. We're solving it other ways too, especially unlocking wallets with biometric data like a fingerprint scan. And then we're also looking to encrypt documents within transaction history on chain, so we can store politically sensitive documents on the Ethereum blockchain. For instance, manuals on how to learn the Rohingya language, things of that nature. And then we also want to encrypt. We have layered. We're building this right now, and it should be ready in 2 weeks. Layered wallets. So say you have a top tier wallet, which is the easiest wallet to access, and we would put emergency medical information about you and maybe a high resolution picture. So, and then this is our solution to blockchain based identity, self-sovereign identity, which you would control. And that first tier you could access with biometric data, like a thumbprint. So let's say you end up in another country and you don't speak the language. And for whatever reason, God forbid, you get into an automobile accident, you're not conscious, emergency medical worker comes, sees you, and swipes your thumb and is able to get access to that first tier wallet, where they can confirm who you are and know what your blood type is. And we initially thought blood type, okay, what we'll do is we'll create like maybe 200 different tokens, because outside of the basic 4 blood types, AB positive, O, there are many rare blood types, and issue you one coin, issue every wallet one coin based on blood type. And then that way, that wallet will be associated with that blood type. And then as long as you link biometric data and a high-res photo, that's kind of like an ID for you. But we thought we could actually do that better if we write that info into the TX hash of a transaction. So, and that's a better way of storing it anyway. So we're building an interface. It's like a free web interface that you just go and you put in your blood information and then public-private key, and then it'll write it automatically to it. So people will be in control of this kind of first tier identity. And then for the lower tiers, we'll have various levels of authentication. So for instance, if an emergency medical technician logs into like a web-based system that wants to read your first tier wallet, and then the hospital administrator and the emergency medical technician authenticate they are who they are and want to read that second tier to look at, maybe, for instance, if you have a pacemaker, what your chronic diseases you suffer from, maybe diabetes. And then for the lower tiers where we're working on encryption, can we encrypt, these are problems we're trying to solve right now, encrypt and store, say for instance, an MRI scan on the Ethereum blockchain. And we're working on that right now. So for for especially people who are poor and can't afford to bring medical records wherever they go. They could store it on the Ethereum blockchain, and then it will just follow them wherever they go.
Okay, so in addition to what you're doing, you have other projects. In this case, you're looking at identity, but you've abstracted the concept of wallet to be more than money, to say there's value of my personal information, maybe my historical information. And I guess I can see education is just a store of value too, right? All the knowledge I have, all the medical I have and everything. And literally it appears that you're doing is you're coming together and saying, over time, people are going to want control of their own information instead of having it stored in these centralized, trusted areas where they don't have access to it. And
absolutely
would be the solution. Interesting. So you've mentioned Ethereum. Are you deploying on Ethereum, or would you end up building your own blockchain, you feel, or
no, we believe in the Ethereum project, and we think it's decentralized enough where it's difficult for a government to take it down, which is important to some people.
Interesting.
And we're actually all talking about everything I'm describing, we're talking about the same project. If you think about it this way, if you educate...
This is all part of the Exsulcoin.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I was confused. I thought that was an educational project, but...
Yeah, solving for education creates other problems, and it cannot just be education alone. So to give you an example, if you educate a person, they'll get frustrated at the end of that journey because they might not have work opportunities. And if you solve for work opportunities, they might get frustrated at the end of that journey because they're not happy with that work. So you need to create a pathway, which is not just one particular opportunities, but a pathway where they can kind of create their own destiny, where people can create their own destiny. That's very important. So it's not just about education, also providing work opportunity, and work opportunity that can be customized. And if you attack those things, you necessarily have to answer the question of, if someone is getting paid for work and that work is being sourced on the other side of the world, how do you know you're not funding terrorism? So because of that, we had to solve the identity issue. And because we're solving the identity issue, we also had to build a reputation system and attach it to that identity, so you know over time if there's any suspicious or criminal activity, that you could flag it.
So then you're building a wallet to kind of tie all this together. The first question that comes to mind, why rebuild a wallet, or why not just like write a Alexa plugin for my Ether wallet or something on that front? You know what I mean? Because you are still 20.
Yeah, we write everything to the Ethereum blockchain. So it's just, if you just think of, if you unpack the word wallet, it's just a public and private key pair. That's all it is. And
Correct.
Just linking different things to that public and private key pair.
Okay. Interesting. I'm looking at your website right now, and I guess what you said is a lot different than what your website says, I guess. I see blockchain.
Very complicated solution, because we wanted to build a lot of technology to solve this pathway problem. And it's best described in our explainer video.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So now, in your stuff, in our case, we actually have a blockchain project working on our end, and we are doing some wallet work. We are your Alexa voice thing is somewhat interesting. Are there collaborative type opportunities, or is this kind of your ecosystem on that front? Just asking.
Yeah, it's definitely collaborative, because we build almost everything on Ethereum. Like I said, we're invested in the community and that ecosystem.
Oh, okay. So maybe afterwards I'll reach out, and maybe we can have my devs and your devs talk on that front. Wow. Well, that's a fascinating thing. So now, in addition to your project, are there other, opportunities? Like, this could be blockchain, this could be outside of blockchain. You as a guy that seems to sniff out all these things, you've got that knack, right?
Uh-huh.
So what does the crystal ball say in terms of what might be interesting to check out?
I think AI-driven education will be the big thing for the next 30 years. No one's really done any innovation on teaching in at least 100 years. And a lot of the assumptions we make, because we have very deeply ingrained systems, which were created and which evolved in a world that wasn't digital and didn't have incredibly cheap computing power, which exists now. So a lot of the assumptions we make because of that system are just wrong. And then I think a lot of efficiencies will come out of technology which are underexploited. In terms of markets, I think it's pretty clear that we're due for a major correction or a crash sometime soon, and I think people don't feel it. And I think
markets, are you specifically talking the derivatives market, or are you talking the futures market?
markets in general. If you look at real estate, or if you look at the stock market, everything's quite expensive, And then I think we've constantly been climbing this wall of worry where markets keep rising, and people are slowly getting priced out of things, and then that's why I believe cryptocurrency is so popular now, because it's optically they're very cheap and the upside is so high, and even though there's no underlying basis for the valuation, it's just market sentiment. I think at some point that will all fix itself, and I think preparing for when that time comes, I think that's a very interesting play to me.
Interesting. So when you say this market crash, I mean, obviously there's a crash, but you're also predicting, or let me take that back. It appears to me that you're saying there will be, asset class movement, where because
absolutely.
Of where real estate goes, or if the derivatives market goes, or, people stop tethering off the US dollar and the debt crushes, the US economy, the value will flee potentially into this, small $400 billion worldwide market cap market instead of the $80 trillion, securities market, or the X trillion dollar real estate market, or whatever on that front.
No, I actually don't think so. I think people, generally when people are fearful, they kind of hold everything very tight. Mm-hmm. And there is a feeling of desperation, and I think those feelings of desperation create enormous opportunities for investors who can understand when those times happen and are ready for them. So, an example: if there is a market crash, you'll see, especially casino operators in Las Vegas, probably travel will dry up, and their revenues will decrease because less people are going out there to party. The parties they throw there and the restaurants they run within the casinos are becoming increasingly higher in terms of what's bringing in revenues into the casinos. And then you'll see pretty big deals that can be exploited on that front. And I would think about exploiting those where possible. Most likely, in terms of they'll probably get flexible on odds. So if you brought, say, $5 or $7 million with you into Las Vegas, you could ask for a change of odds. So like in blackjack, and then you could beat them just on basic strategy with a change in how things are dealt, or for instance, how many times the maybe a 2-deck blackjack shoe is shuffled, for instance, and then you could probably 2 or 3x your money then. So there'll be things like that, and getting ready for those things, I think now is a good thing to do.
So you got $5 million sitting in a suitcase, ready to go to Vegas in a minute?
I think from my side, I've adequately prepared.
That's an interesting play. Everyone always has the dream of, either counting cards in Vegas or playing poker. Mm-hmm. But I've never thought of that perspective of literally going in, and they're so desperate for business that they will actually play odds to get you in so that they keep their restaurants open and the hotels
it's not certain, but it's high probability. And I look at the world I divide the world into low probability and high probability, and I try to focus all my effort on high probability with I call it risk approaching zero. I don't think you get zero risk, but you could find scenarios where risk is so zero.
Ooh. You still there? Oh, we dropped you for a second. Sorry.
Sorry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So yeah, I mean that's the classic textbook definition of an asymmetric return, right? You know,
Yes.
low risk,
Mm-hmm.
high reward,
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
and everything. Okay, so opportunities out there. We believe the trend is that this derivatives market, the world debt load, whatever you want to call it, you know, that's got to pop. You know, it can't keep going. You know, eventually it's going to happen. The blue ocean to prep for is a suitcase of money for Vegas. Some blockchain stuff in the crypto markets, you know, potentially also, or
no, I would stay away from crypto markets, but crypto patents, blockchain patents, those are interesting.
Interesting.
Because
Why?
put it to you this way, there's a lot of money being raised in ICOs, but not a lot of things are being built. So if you could build it ahead of these teams and then patent that technology, you essentially own that beachfront real estate against teams who need to build that, and they're very well funded.
Oh, so then they'll have to they'll have to take you out.
They'll have to license it, yeah, or buy it, or risk their investors suing them.
Interesting. Makes sense. So have you guys filed a few more blockchain patents then? Are you guys busy?
Yes, we have about 30 in the pipeline.
Oh, nice. Good for you. Cool. Interesting. You know, it's very seldom that I'm at a loss of words. You know, I find that intriguing on that front. So education. So now, let me see. That's intriguing on that front. Now, how does that the patent side though? I mean, are you filing worldwide patent? You got to go international then.
America and China. That's all we care about.
Interesting. So you don't care about like the Middle East or any of those other places, or
no, not really.
Anything on that front? Because yeah, those are the main markets. Wow. Well, we've definitely covered a bunch. We've definitely covered it in a very efficient manner. You are very you get to the point, and that's great. Anything you want to chat about?
Entirely up to you. I'm happy to chat about just about anything. I mean, there's some things we build in stealth and I can't talk about, but outside of that, happy to.
Yeah, let me see. Okay, so you've got the eye. We talked about the eye tracking, the on-chain reputation. Okay, and you've got an insurance product also, I guess?
Yeah, that we built in stealth. You know, it's the Warren Buffett play, you know, and it was difficult to get into in the insurance business because insurance companies, insurance is so heavily regulated, and insurance companies that are operating now have so much money that it's difficult for a new player to come in with a cheaper insurance product. But now with blockchain, you can, just because you can automate certain insurance processes. And from what I've seen that exists right now, you have products on private permission chains where you develop a new programming language because Solidity is very limited. And you can create complex insurance products. And most insurance products are very complex. However, we did create a couple of innovations where we are able to do insurance in a way that automates insurance. Something happens and you get paid. One of the things we're working on, one of the things I can talk about is auto insurance, which is seemingly impenetrable. But if you know anything about fixing cars, you'll know that if you ever go into a new car, you'll see that when someone isn't sitting in the passenger side seat, the passenger side airbag will turn off. And the reason for that is when the passenger side airbag deploys, it raises the entire dashboard and it causes so much destruction that you can't fix it afterwards. So the car is pretty much salvage. So if you could grab that data, smart contract, if-then statement, if the passenger side airbag deploys, you could automatically pay salvage value for that vehicle. And that is a type of blockchain-based insurance that can be written, and most people could trust, because you trust that passenger side airbag sensor, which is difficult to tamper with because those are explosives there, and you could automatically pay that off. And then QNX, the system that BlackBerry works with, that's a heavily developed, well-developed system for securing these automotive computer systems. So the security is pretty high end.
Nice. And speaking of insurance, I guess I have to mention, you mentioned that, how do you, let's talk about the concepts of peak performance. And, this becomes more of a personal question, right? So you have you mentioned something that the optimum peak performance level is you have worked till the point of hospitalization, and then you have ratcheted that back about 15%.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit more about that. Like, how do you know? And it's interesting because I spent some time personally, I'm into endurance sports. So I'm not sure if you've heard of triathlon and stuff like that.
Yes.
And, I did Ironman. I don't do it as much anymore, but that's like your that's an interesting optimization problem, because like over a 9-hour period, as someone goes over 140 miles, the body is going to run out of glycogen and you will crash. So it's a function of, keeping the leaky bucket as leaky as possible so that you end up as close to empty as possible, because if it overflows and crashes, there's a whole nother mess to deal with. So that intrigued me. So like in your case, you had a period of time where you worked yourself to hospitalization. What was that like? Or
Absolutely. When you feel like you need to go see the doctor. And I think it's important because it's very difficult to define hard work. I used to think 60 or 70 hours a week was hard work. That's a lot of hours to put into office work, for instance. But, you could easily work over 100 hours a week. I don't think it really, I don't really think that's unattainable or unreasonable for a human who is really motivated to work hard, to work those kinds of hours. And it's just about pushing yourself to the point where you can understand, this is my personal limit. And then I think everyone needs to push themselves. So for instance, a lot of the tasks I do from day to day are they require a heavy cognitive load. So I need 7 hours a night. I used to think, I could get away with 6 hours, but the work performance suffers. So I usually get 7 hours so I could do the type of solutions building that's indicative of the work I put out.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, right, 168 hours in a week, right, 7 times 24. If you have 7 hours a night, that still leaves 119 hours for you to work. I guess you got to back out sometime. You got to eat occasionally.
And travel, and
all that sort of stuff. So what is, how do you maintain that peak performance, or how do you keep that?
I believe people should be honest about reality. Drugs are an option. Caffeine, for instance, Sudafed is good. It's a mild amphetamine, and it's the off-label use is sometimes as an appetite suppressant for people who work out. You have they call it an EC stack, where you have ephedrine and caffeine, and then you can work out a lot because you have a lot of energy, but you're not very hungry, so you end up, getting definition in your body. But you could also use that to produce quite a substantial amount of work, just because it changes the way you view the world.
Interesting. So there are certain chemical mixes that you will use to manipulate your body and your mind.
Mostly caffeine and Sudafed, yes.
Okay, lots of caffeine and Sudafed.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But caffeine is a thing that most people know about. It's just I recommend it. It's a thing. If you're performing less than what you feel you're able to, try having 2 or 3 more cups of coffee per day and see if that improves things.
Now, isn't there a bit of there is the addictive effect of caffeine too, and doesn't your body gradually adapt?
Sure, and so you can't work. if you think about it in practical terms, if you're working on a project, say for instance at Exsulcoin, we're making cartoons for kids in the Rohingya language, and if I'm working on this for 180 days straight and it's not getting done, I need to reason with myself and understand that I am not the right person to be doing this task because I cannot get it done. It naturally will wane itself. I mean, there are periods where you need to work very intensely on specific things, and then that's when, overcompensating on, say for instance, Sudafed or caffeine. That's when that's appropriate. And then there are other times when there's more physical work involved or different types of work involved where you don't need that as much. It's just it's very helpful for periods where I need intense concentration. So, for instance, when I wrote our white paper, it's like I would stay up day and night doing enough research to get everything right. And, pulling those all-nighters was very difficult without having maybe 6 or 7 cups of coffee every day.
Mm.
But I don't do that anymore. I have maybe 1 or 2 cups of coffee.
Okay, so you're kind of tapering right now for the next
right. Mm-hmm.
And then you'll stack it up. So I guess that's the question though. Like, how do you know? Because there's a hospitalization effect. So I assume by saying that there was a point where you worked yourself to some type of a nervous breakdown, or you had some issue.
Well, you definitely feel burnout. And I definitely felt burnt out, and I had to see a doctor about it. And then I realized that was my limit. And then I know what that feels like, and I could push myself to just before that. And then that's when I know I could squeeze it as much as possible.
So is that a feel thing, or do you have, with you, I feel, I can't help but wonder that you have some sort of a meter or something that like checks your blood pressure or checks your system and says, okay, I'm getting near that neural break.
There's honesty is very important. And by honesty, a lot of it's self-awareness and knowing how your body works and how it feels and being able to control feelings inside of you. A lot of the reason, a big part of why people don't perform at their peak is because they feel feelings inside of themselves that they can't control. I want to work harder, but I can't do it. I feel I can't go on. Feelings of despair, feelings of hopelessness. But those are things at the highest level you will need to work through and master and change within yourself. Because in a way, if you really break it down into the smallest components, feelings within yourself are created from energies within your body. So like your energy, it takes energy to think, it takes energy to speak, it also takes energy to create feelings within your body. And if you can control enough of your body where you could change those feelings, you could use those feelings for other things.
So that's a lot of mindset shifting, I guess, in terms of, what is it?
Mm-hmm.
A positive perspective or that. Now, that sort of mental clarity, though, that is not chemical induced. There is some type of self-reflection process involved.
There are definitely concrete techniques for people to use to kind of sublimate those feelings into different things. So, for instance, sometimes people have, most people's problem, I believe, is that they're not honest with themselves. And part of what happens is that there's a part of you that wants to do one thing, and then there's another part of you that wants to do another thing. So, for instance, the person who smokes and can't quit, it's like, I know this cigarette's bad for me, and I'll quit someday, but they keep smoking. And you would think it's a simple behavioral change, meaning not putting the cigarette to your mouth, but it's a lot harder than that because there are conflicting parts within that person's self. And it's about getting those parts to agree, or also changing the way you feel about things. So, for instance, some people have a voice inside of their head that might be very critical of them. Maybe you shouldn't wear that because you don't have the right body type for that. But if you were to change that voice inside, as an example, if you played circus music inside your head while that voice was talking to you, that would change the way you feel about it. And if that doesn't change it for you specifically, change the type of music, change the volume, change where the voice is situated inside your personal space. So exerting personal control over what's happening inside of yourself that you have no control of. I think it's important for people to be honest in recognizing that that's happening within them, and then experiment to find self-awareness of what they're able to do with it to kind of change it in a way that produces results they want.
Interesting. So, in addition to, so I guess the question, does it start with the chemical balances, or do you start with, I guess the core is probably mindset shift first, right? So you've got to make sure that you've got the right mindset. When you're able to control that and get that shift, then it's a function of, okay, my mindset is clear. I have a defined goal. I need to obtain the goal. And then whether I, supplement with Sudafed, caffeine, vegetables, or some sort of, I don't know, ketosis powder, or who knows, those are just means to an end on that front.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair to say. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, hey, we've been on for close to an hour.
I didn't realize that.
It's been a fun conversation. I thought this would be more of a blockchain conversation, but I was intrigued at the performance side of the equation. It's very seldom that I don't meet that many people that intrigue me at that level. For what it's worth.
Thanks. It's kind of you.
Yeah. I guess the one thing it's interesting, and you made me think. So in the world of triathlon, one of the tools that came about, because everyone used to, if you think about it, if you're doing an Ironman, you're going to bike for, 112 miles, I think, or give or take a few. And that becomes anywhere from a 4 to 5 hour affair to, keep that body going. And because most situations aren't flat, people go up and down hills and all that sort of stuff, it's very hard to maintain a steady state. And ultimately, if you look at peak performance is best done when you're able to maintain a steady state. It's the variability that really kind of sucks the body dry. So what people have done is they've built, power meters or measurements so that, if I'm trying to optimize output on a bike, I'm not looking at like my breathing. I'm not going by feel. I'm not doing all that sort of stuff. Literally, I'm watching an output number. So I know as long as I output this power level, that should be my execution point. I can't help but wonder, and a person like you, you're looking at these things, maybe there is like a neural power output or some sort of a meter that we could use to kind of measure our body efficiency, given a ratio, tying that to heart rate, tying that to output, tying that to maybe temperature level or something like that, that we can make sure that, as we go through the day and try to maintain, our 100-hour plus work weeks at peak efficiency, we don't, burn out, I guess, on that front.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. I haven't looked at, I guess, I would call these endurance athletic research. I'm not very familiar with it, to be frank with you. However, I think what's important to note is I've always thought about this. Let's say you're Superman. And you have unlimited super strength. The thing isn't about having super strength. It's what do you do with it at the end of the day. If you can't deploy it into getting goals that you want, then it defeats the purpose of having it in the first place. So I think this goal orientation is very important, and understanding the different ways you could deploy whatever talents you have, limits or not, into achieving those goals. I think that is, in a way, that's a realistic and practical way of defining intelligence.
Cool. Well, if anyone wants to get a hold of you, do they go to the website, Exsulcoin?
Yeah, go to the website. All the information's there. There's a general email that I get sent copies of every day. So every message that goes through, I end up looking at some point.
Great. Well, hey, James, thanks a lot for your time coming in from London. It's probably pretty late there now, too. So thanks for staying up. Had a wonderful conversation. Definitely we'll check out the coin, and let's stay in touch as you go about, going about your way and solving problems. And actually, I will reach out to you. We are interested if you've built some sort of an Alexa app. Do you guys have, is there some sort of like modularity or plugin feature? Like I could plug that into a different wallet for key exchange? Have you looked at packaging that way, or is it all tied in?
It right now it accesses your Coinbase account for you.
Oh, okay. Cool. Alrighty. Well, hey, thanks a lot. Talk to
Okay,
you soon,
take
man.
care. It was a
You too.
pleasure.
Okay, bye-bye.